So you could give a developer, you could give all developers in this country a complete license to build as much as they want. They can build, all over the Blue Mountains. They could build in the middle of the Sahara Desert if they wanted to meet that supply. But if they're going to charge $1 million per home, or if they're going to charge, hundreds and hundreds of dollars per week in rent, then it's not going to be affordable. So there may be a supply issue in terms of like everybody wants to live in a detached house, but there's not enough houses out there to meet that type of demand. However, this is where the whole affordable housing myth via supply goes out the window. Because let's just say, even if they cleared enough land and developed enough housing, like detached homes, for everyone in Australia that wanted them, and this is what developers do, they don't say, oh, well, far out, we've just like literally met demand and everybody in Australia can have a house now. Let's just make sure that the cost of all of these houses is like, goes down to like $200,000 a house. They still want to sell all of these blocks with a house on it for over $1 million. And so unless people's wages have risen to be like, at least $1 million a year or something like that, they are still going to be in housing stress when they buy those. If the average Australian income is less than $100,000 a year and you have one income coming into that household and they buy a house for $1 million, they are in housing stress. Even if there is enough houses out there for every single person, if the market dictates the price of that housing that they are going to buy, or the price of the rent on that house that they're going to live in is well above 30% of their income, then they are still in housing stress and affordability doesn't exist. So you could give a developer, you could give all developers in this country a complete license to build as much as they want. They can build, all over the Blue Mountains. They could build in the middle of the Sahara Desert if they wanted to meet that supply. But if they're going to charge $1 million per home, or if they're going to charge, hundreds and hundreds of dollars per week in rent, then it's not going to be affordable. It doesn't matter about supply. It will never matter about supply if the costs associated with housing yourself don't go down. And it will never go down for IS because it is an item on a market. And like that is the big conversation that like no one has. And that's why I was wondering whether this gentleman Cameron Murphy or not is a Marxist, or like uses Marx's kind of analysis of capitalism, or if he's just like kind of a bourgeois style economist.
Well, look, he definitely uses Marx and Engels in the introduction.
Right.
So at least he's very well aware of, the various housing questions that have been through the years. But I guess in terms of a solution and whether he is a Marxist or not, I'm not entirely sure. But what he definitely talks about in the latter half of the book, which was going to be the next point I was going to bring us to, is what he calls his concept housemate, which effectively was a public housing slash alternate to the market system. Because he pretty much flatly says, with this 5 equilibria that he talks with in the book, and all of these actors, this cheering squad of YIMBYs slash property developers that are...
Did he say YIMBYs?
Yes.
YIMBYs? Okay.
Yes,
as opposed to NIMBYs, right?
Yes. Look, that's another aspect of the book that I won't go into, but he's very critical of YIMBYs.
YIMBYs?
Yeah.
Because usually people are critical of NIMBYs.
Yes. So I won't spoil it. You should read it for yourself, but he's very critical of YIMBYs.
Okay, so just so for the audience, a NIMBY is not in my backyard. So they're people that are anti-development, and they don't want things happening near them that are going to affect their peace and tranquility, the Australian dream that they bought into, their slice of Australiana, let's say. And they don't want things affecting, their suburban backyard kind of existence. But YIMBYs are different to that. I'm not very versed in YIMBYs because they don't usually present a problem in my world, but they're yes in my backyard people, and they don't mind a bit of development. Is that right?
Yes, but you mentioned density before, and like, you know, if you know, in even in a scenario where we gave property developers all of they want, it's not like they would immediately go out and turn everything into housing and make brutalist architecture and rows of houses. They would only do as much that is profitable.
Yes.
And this, along with the density equilibrium that he discusses in the book, if I remember the part correctly, he's like, oh, well, YIMBYs, they, much like the property developers, they kind of want to cut red tape. It's a Trojan horse for the property developers. They're like, I forget the specific criticism he has of them, but I can definitely tell you he was critical of them.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and what he kind of discussed.
Yeah, what's his solution? His solution?
His solution was what he calls housemate, where he's like, hey, this equilibrium exists. YIMBYs exist. The cheerleading squad for how the housing market actually works, whether that's politicians or property developers, exists. And quite frankly, without changing this market, without getting rid of this system, you're just not going to do it. So your next best option is to create an alternate market. So what he says is, quote unquote, housemate would be a parallel public home ownership system alongside purchase and rental in the private property market. It's like adding an extra board of the game of Monopoly, but one where the 5 property market equilibria do not dictate pricing, housing production, and access. Ideally, a housemate system would offer apartments in inner urban locations, townhouses in middle suburbs, and detached homes in outer suburbs, and feature a variety of dwelling sizes and designs to accommodate different household sizes. And there's two quotes in the latter half of the book that kind of back up this thing. Is that one, he's massively supportive of the Singapore housing like alternative system that's there, and two, he makes a huge argument in the latter half of the book where he's like, well, if you actually think about it, we already have alternate systems that are in place. Like the schooling system, there is both private schools as well as public/state schools. Sure, the funding for the state schools has not been the best lately, but an alternate system within public schooling actually exists if you are unable to spend the private tuitions that is private schooling. You can send your kid to a state school.
Yes.
And because that logic exists, you should be able to institute something like the Singapore system, something like housemate, where there's an alternative to the market. Though, to be completely honest, probably a Marxist or a leftist would just say, yeah, that's public housing.
Yeah. And like, it sounds like he's just calling it public housing.
Yeah.
It is just public housing, but he's just saying, like, you know, you'd have different types of public housing as opposed to just like these ghetto skyscraper blocks, like kind of thing, where everybody lives in the same shoebox. You'd have varied housing actually that like reflects the market to a certain degree. So in more dense areas, you'd have apartment living. In more medium density areas, you'd have townhouse living. And then in more low density areas, you would have detached homes and stuff like that. So you'd have public housing that meets and reflects the character of the locality that it's based in, which, like, you know, makes sense. It'd be like how the market responds to market forces or the desired character of an area. So should, you know, public housing, and not just be like this form of development and built environment that has absolutely no response to its surroundings. It should be integrated with the character of the area. I think that makes perfect sense. And like, let's take this conversation like completely out of the bourgeois kind of economic system, the market realm, and stop talking about like this, like it's a problem that can be solved by the bourgeois system, which is the market system. Like, let's take this back to some fundamentals here. Housing is not only a necessity, so like humans need shelter in order to survive. Housing, and quality housing, is a goddamn human right, as put forward by the UN in their many articles. And so like, if housing is, and quality housing that is a goddamn human right for us, we as a society are failing to ensure that all people are provided with quality housing. If we have markets that are set up where people literally cannot enter those markets at all, and like there's not enough supply for them in areas of their choosing, that leads to that demonstrates or exemplifies the fact that there isn't quality housing. Because if people are having to make a sacrifice on where they want to live, they're not getting the quality of housing that they require. People should be able to choose where they want to live, and the market should be able to respond to that. And if the market cannot for us, then we take housing off the market.